Damon, it's my grandfather's Yahrzeit tomorrow night, not
Okay, let's do it now. Absolutely.
Okay, so name late grandfather, my mother's father, his English name was Harry, but his Hebrew name was Tzvi. He was actually born in Tels in Lithuania, and was they had to. These people basically came to South Africa. They came because they were they were there. They were maybe Jews meant nothing, and they could have been killed easily, and nothing would have done. So they had to basically relocate for their own safety, for their own lives. And so he had was quite a strict guy, but he had good values and probably filtered down to us in some way, my siblings and my cousins. So his name was Tzvi ben Betzalel.
Okay, my grandfather's name was Harry, and his Hebrew name was also Tzvi.
Yeah, that's Harry Tzvi. Yes, I don't know why I don't know another guy.
I'll tell you why. There's Harry was Herzl, and the Hebrew word for Herzl is Tzvi.
Okay.
And in fact, Jeff Kaplan's father, his name was Harry, and his Hebrew name was Tzvi as well. So that's three Tzvi.
Three Tzvis, yes.
No, three Tzvis, yeah.
Okay, so continuing with the what we were discussing yesterday, the Sfas Emes suggests that easy mitzvahs are underpinning upon which the entire edifice of our humanity rises. Isurei Torah cites an exposition of the Sfas Emes's words in the name of Rav Itzadek Blazer. A person needs to know that sometimes even a small action can determine his lot in this world and the next. This can be analogized to a man trying to reach a city, but he only has enough money to buy a ticket to the last station before his destination. Because he's lacking this small amount of money, he'll need to get off the train and he'll not reach his destination. Similarly, in heavenly matters, there can be a small deed that a person neglects, and consequently all of his other good deeds may prove insufficient to tilt the scale in his favor. Given that small things reveal the authentic nature of a person, one needs to take note of them in business matters and most certainly in shidduchim. The true test of an individual is his unprepared response to trivial matters that arise unpredictably. The distinguished businessman was offered a promising partnership opportunity. To evaluate the offer, he flew to the prospective partner's town. To best utilize their limited time together, they decided to meet several times over the weekend in the lobby of a hotel and in long walks. During these meetings, the businessman was very impressed by his host both for his conversational skills and business acumen. However, there were several minor issues that needled at him. The host never asked him as they returned from a walk if he was perhaps tired or thirsty. Moreover, his host was habitually late for their appointments and offered faint excuses. After much reflection, the businessman decided that the prospective partner lacked interpersonal skills crucial for business networking. Fearful that this could be a liability at any crossroads of disagreement in the future, he thus rejected the offer. As he discussed his decision with his wife, he pointed out, from our bitter experience, we know that we could have spared our daughter much grief if we had only paid attention to the seemingly little things that we heard about our son-in-law. We ignored them and focused on his virtues. Since the business partnership would require frequent and almost daily contact, I decided that I do not want to repeat that mistake. The small things reveal otherwise hidden character traits, and they should figure in choosing candidates for leadership.
Good, Kevin. Well done.
It's like we had somebody. I'll give you an example. You don't know who this is, so Gavin and Arthur definitely don't know. Neither do you. When we had the business in Germiston, we had a lady who was the buyer, she was very efficient, and eventually she got long in the tooth, and she was quite an arrogant person, and she knew better than everybody. And when a rep used to come, she used to make them stand at her table. So I came and we thought, she's who does she think she is? So I once went, and well, actually might have been more than one. And I said, and I offered someone a chair. I said, please sit. Like, she's the queen. Well, it wasn't even her business. It was and my dad didn't like it. I didn't like it. Look, we weren't always around to see it. So I said, please sit. You don't have to stand. And she did. It was this arrogance and ego, which wasn't done. You know, I mean, it's luckily they needed us. You know, but still, you don't treat people like that.
I agree.
Good. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So before we do the Gemara, because Arthur, I think his client needs him for a minute, and I don't want to get started without him.
Yeah, do you want to push pause? There he is.
No. Are you, Arthur? Are you okay? Are you with us?
I was just checking the guy now. It's just the nurse helped me, so I'm moving back.
Okay, that's fine. Do you need a few minutes with your patient? Okay. All right. So, Arthur, what did we go through yesterday? Since
Bava Kamma. So yesterday.
I'm saying, what do you remember from yesterday, guys? I work actually hard. I prep for the show. I just want to know that you have something. Come on, guys.
Okay.
Tell me what you.
I could be more specific. Bava Kamma book 3.
Pretty good. No. So, Arthur, seriously, what did you have?
Yesterday. I'm trying to think now. Hold on. It's a hard day for me. No, I remember what you went through. I just got to try through because I also remember I was listening to this morning.
What I went through emotionally or with the subject material?
Well, emotionally, it's the same every day. You go through it every day. And we apologize for that.
My client died this morning. So
who died?
The guy, one of my clients in Tel Aviv, Amir, the one I was seeing 3 times a week.
Sorry.
Yeah. They checked him. We went to hospital last night. Got told by the wife he's in hospital. Got a call this morning by my manager saying to me, did you hear about arrest? Yeah, he's in hospital. No, he died. He died at 4 o'clock. He was fine at 4 o'clock in the morning. 6 o'clock in the morning, he was dead. They found him dead in the bed at the hospital. Just went. But he was really weak.
So listen, you get a pass.
So yesterday you were discussing about, if I remember correctly, if somebody inflicts damage on the daughter, on the guy's daughter, what do you get? I mean, does she get the money? Etc. I remember we were discussing about the
excellent. Perfect. That's exactly the question: is who gets the money? Does the daughter get the money or does the father? So we're going to do a 5-minute review. Now, I want to ask you guys a big favor. Kevin, I'm enjoying this musa you're giving very much. It is taking a lot longer than halacha, but I feel it's essential because my day changes as a result. And I'll give you an example. I did 2 minor mitzvahs today that generally I figured and I did them with alacrity, even though I wasn't in them, specifically because of what you taught me last night. And I thought, one never knows the reward for a big mitzvah or a small mitzvah. That's why I should never specify. But things that don't take much time, that we're lazy about, that either one doesn't bench properly or with the right kavana, where it takes 2 minutes of effort to put in you've changed my day today. I just want to tell you from what you taught me yesterday. And I really appreciate
it. Yes, I hope for me as for all of us.
Yeah. But
it's common sense.
But just because it's common doesn't mean it's common sense. Because people there's not much common sense. I watched a couple of woke videos on TikTok, and half the population, I'm telling you, they're trees that are giving their lives, producing oxygen for these wasted people.
Yeah.
Oxygen. They're sucking the oxygen off the trees for the rest of us.
Dang. The trees are more intelligent than us, the people out there.
No, but trees are working hard to support these lives.
Yeah.
Kevin, can I put a TikTok video of a clock making the sound TikTok? Can I put that as a TikTok video? I think that'll go down well, Kevin. I'll have millions of views.
What I'm asking you is as follows, that
Send another link.
So far we've taken 13 minutes and 40 seconds.
Sorry, I didn't. Yeah, but you.
No. I'm happy. I'm happy.
How long did I speak for? Was it like more than 5 minutes?
Listen, just give me a sec. I'm saying I'm not objecting. I'm not objecting at all, because what you're teaching us here, sometimes the halacha can go over my head, whereas this helps me keep halacha. I'm finding what you're doing very productive. And even if it does take longer, occasionally if we lose close to 14 minutes, we need to send another link, because if the Gemara share is short, then what happens is we're repeating the next day what we had the previous day, because there's hardly any time to cover.
Yeah, it's just a pity that, Microsoft Teams has a clock from minute 0, and you see it.
It takes a second.
It's a pity that we don't see it on Zoom. It would be a great feature. You know what I mean?
I appreciate what you say as well, because a lot of the time, though I love Bava Kamma, it's nice to have something that's different
that you can come away with. Something.
And this book I nearly gave to Gavin Bill permanently, and it would have gone to Australia.
So I appreciate it.
I'm pleased it stayed up on high and for divine service, not go down under. So I'm very happy in many cases. Just as a matter of interest, guys, there's a book I recommend. I was learning it. There were about 10 of us last night that were learning it with Michael King. There's a book called Nesivos Shalom that was authored by Rabbi Shalom Noach Berezovsky. So I don't know if you know who he was the Shlomo Rebbe, and he was born in 1911 and he died in the year 2000. He lived until 89. So he died fairly recently. And he's got a collection of his classic essays on the weekly parsha, but he goes for the remes, he goes for the hidden parts. And I'm just saying that there's certain things that I've learned in there that I haven't heard before. Often the ideas you hear on the parsha are the same, but it was actually it was nice. It was different to Rav Pam or Rabbi Yisachar Friend, or it was just different. You know what I'm saying? And 10 of us were learning it last night. It was actually quite something.
With Michael King.
Yeah.
He explains very well.
Yeah, he was the first person I learned Sanhedrin with, and he was reading it straight from the Hebrew.
Arthur needs to meet him, Damon.
Yeah. Michael King, yes. And King Arthur, I get it. All right, I'm going to send a new link, guys.
Okay.
This has been real. Is with over 500 that we've done, and you look at the videos over the last X amount of years, we've all aged slightly. If you have a look at color of hair, hairlines, quality of face, aging, it's bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre if you look at the earlier videos, and you can see certain times when we're sick and when we're well. It's unbelievable. It really is unbelievable. You should get a bit of a timeline. Please God, if we learn for 10 years, you'll see transformations that are minor transformations in terms of physical, and great transformations in terms of spiritual growth. Say amen, guys.
Amen.
Okay.
We're going to say amen.
May we all be married with children. Amen.
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 You're the only guy with orange hair by the time.
Okay. All right. So speaking of hair, we're going to be talking about the 3-stage legal states that a girl enters into according to a level of physiological endocrinological development. So the first thing you have is katnut, which is a stage of a minor, and then what happens is that's up to the age of 12, and then narus is the stage where the girl itself in that stage is called a nara, where she is 12 years to 12 and a half with at least 2 pubic hairs. So she's entering adolescence, but she's still under the control of her father in certain realms, particularly in terms of the fact that he can choose a husband for her, even as it says one who has boils, somebody that she's not really physically attracted to. He's got domain over her in that respect, and he's got domain over her income. Okay. Now, when she is 12 and a half, even if she hasn't developed sexually further than 2 pubic hairs, she is considered a bagrut or bochrus, and a lady in that stage is known as a bogeret or bogeres, okay, in the bachrus stage. And that means full legal adulthood, okay? So what happens is exactly as Arthur said. Rav Elazar inquired of Rav, in the case of one who wounds a minor daughter of others, to whom is the injury payment made? In other words, do we say that since the merciful one confirmed the gains of the girl's stage of Narus to her father, the injury payment also is her father's? And you could say, well, what is the reason? Because the assailant lessens her value in terms of what? Well, since the father has the right to sell his minor daughter as a Hebrew maidservant or as a governess, and that injury lessens her value, it adversely affects his financial well-being because now he has to support her. And also it could adversely affect the situation because now she can't be married off to a wealthier guy, because if she has permanent physical injuries, she's worth less in the dating market as well. Okay, so that's one of the considerations in saying maybe it's like that. And note it uses the word narus of a father. So it means as a minor, for sure, all the money that comes to her generally does belong to the father. It's more in the question, the stage of narus, from 12 to 12 and a half or 2 pubic hairs, where she's going to earn more because she's now of an age of a young woman, and now she is considered at workable age. I mean, a girl that's 4 years old, she's going to take dishes perhaps and carry it to the lounge, but she certainly can't educate other children as a governess, nor properly serve a household as a maidservant, nor is eligible to be married. So it's that sort of perception that's also asked. And it says maybe it's the fact that the father's entitled to injury payment. Well, maybe it's only the gains of the stage of Narus that the merciful one conferred to the father, such as her betrothal money, for if he wants to give her over in marriage to a man smitten with boils, he can give her over to him. So what the other argument is, maybe the father's not entitled to anything. Maybe the father's only entitled to 2 things. Number one, her betrothal money, the dowry, as we call it, and maybe has control over who she marries, and that's about it. But regarding injury payments, since if he wants to wound her, he may not wound her, the merciful one did not confer to him payments for her injuries. So what do we mean? It's obvious that a father cannot wound his daughter because no Jew may injure any other Jew. And where do we know that from? Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 3, where it says, listen, if you the court-appointed corporal punishment agent, you're not allowed to give more than the prescribed measure of lashes. So if you can't give more than to somebody that deserves lashes, then surely if somebody's innocent, you can't hurt them at all. It's just like a kol v'chol as a source. But obviously, we know by logic you can't. Nobody can hurt another Jew, and a father doesn't have rights to. Of course not. So since he doesn't get the payments for an injury in that case, if anything happens, why should he get it if other people hurt it? It's just a fancy way of saying that all he's entitled to, the father, according to the one opinion, is her right over the husband and her betrothal or dowry money. And the other argument is it's not the case, because if she's a minor, or if she's in the stage of Narus, that 12 to 12 and a half or 2 pubic hairs, where she's a quasi-adult, then in that particular case, the father is still financially supporting her, and therefore he might be entitled to it. And certainly if it affects her ability to earn a living, and like family can't afford to keep her, but they can get her financially independent with a dowry, not a dowry, financially independent with employment, then in that particular, as a maidservant, then in that particular case, if she's physically injured and can no longer work, the family has to support her. And who takes the loss? The father, because he has to financially support her. So those are 2 sides of the argument. If you remember, there was the side of Rav and Rav Eliezer. So Rav said to Rav Eliezer, the Torah granted to the father only the gains of the girl's stage of Narus. Damages are paid to the girl itself. Okay? In other words, that it doesn't apply to monetary gains, not even the betrothal money. The only thing that the father can do is nullify her vows. In Kesubos 46b, saying, I don't want you to marry this person, or you can marry this person. But as far as payments are concerned, according to Rav, it doesn't go to the girl's father. It belongs to the girl. Rav Elazar is of a different opinion. He retorts to Rav and he says, look, you learn from the case where one who wounds a Hebrew servant is liable to all of the damages, all the 5 categories of payment, except for the loss of employment when the servant is his. Since a master receives his servant's loss of employment payment when the injury is inflicted by a third party, the father should receive his daughter's loss of employment payment in such a case. So it's saying, why would it be any different? At the end of the day, a master sells his slave services, or would, in other words, the slave is a tailor and he's got a dress shop and he has to pay the slave X and he sells his services for Y. I often prefer to use the example of employer and employee in modern times, that what a business does is it pays a certain salary to the employee and they make a markup on that salary. They've got a myriad of jobs where you have a goods and you get the final product at which they sell the final product for a profit. Alternatively, in a service-orientated business, you make a markup on an expertise because the business has expenses like marketing, legal, administration, etc. And everybody makes profit down the line. So what we are saying is, if you've got an employee and that person is injured, the company is entitled to those payments because now it's got to get somebody else to do that work that they're reselling. So too, a father now has to look after his daughter if she's not financially self-sufficient. So that is Rav Elazar's argument to Rav. Rav says, no, the payment all belongs to the daughter. So the Gemara answers, Abaya said, Rav concedes regarding loss of employment that the father receives this payment because her earnings unto a bachrus, which is when she's a Bulgarian, belong to the father. Meaning when she's a fully fledged adult at 12 and a half, and obviously with a sexual maturity of 2 or more pubic hairs, etc., she's a legal adult at 12 and a half. At that point, she's no longer has to be under the financial care of her father. Yeah. But in the stage of Narus, from 12 to 12 and a half, and a minor, those earnings that she does, especially if she comes from an impoverished family, take a lot of pressure off the family. So that loss of employment means that if she can't work and earn from another source as a maidservant or a governess, the father is having to pay for that. And therefore, even Abaya says, Rav agrees with Rav Elazar, that loss of employment is something that the father gets, but the damages, in other words, actual nezek, goes to the girl, pain, humiliation, medical bills. Rav Elazar is obviously of that opinion as well. So the argument in terms of where they differ is that Rav Elazar is saying that the father is entitled to also the nezek, the actual damage, not just the loss of employment necessary. So the Gemara persists in its challenge because Rav Elazar retorted to Rav from a different brass, and this is where we hit the new part. One who wounds his adult son shall give him compensation immediately. In other words, if the father, just say he gives his son a bit of musa and gives him a crack, and he's technically a legal adult, like he's over bar mitzvah age, he has to give him a compensation immediately. Okay? But if he wounds his minor son, he shall establish the trust for him. And what do we mean establish a trust? It's interesting that the Gemara uses the word segula. Now, I always thought segula was a good omen. Now, it actually doesn't mean that. It basically says that he shall establish a trust. The word segula actually means a storehouse or treasury. So when we say it's a good omen, it means it's the fact that you're going to have good things happen to you. And if you put money aside or provisions aside, good things will happen to you. I don't know how the two terms got mixed up, but they did. But literally, that's what segula does mean. So in other words, when a child's a minor, if you give him all the money, he's going to blow it on sweets. And if he's still young enough under his father's care, he's gonna blow it on things inappropriately. So a trust has to be set up for him so that when he's old enough to take responsibility, he gets the dividends. As an adult, because he's responsible, the father has to give him the payment immediately. And one who owns his minor daughter is not liable for any payment. Okay, so that is
one who?
A father who wounds his minor daughter is not liable for any payment. I also battled with it, Gav.
Not even a trust, nothing.
Nothing.
That's hectic. Yeah.
It's hectic. It's hectic. These were different times. Maybe there's a balance between this woke feminism stuff and a thing where daughters have a certain amount of rights. Do you know what I mean? Maybe there's a happy medium, but women now think they're so oppressed. They don't even know how lucky they are. You should take them back in a time machine. They'll come back and realize they've never lived so good.
Yeah, that's what 100%.
Yeah, so anyway, nothing's left her, Gav. So not only that, but others who wound her are obligated to give compensation to her father. So even when other people wound her, this is used as a proof that saying a minor differs from a minor son, and that the father has certain rights over her, which he doesn't have with his son. So among those rights is the right to collect her compensatory payments. So this brisa would seem to refute Rav, because Rav was quite progressive, Gavin. He ruled that the daughter can keep the damages payment. Do you get what I'm saying? He
was obviously a Democrat, yeah.
No, he wasn't a Democrat. He was no.
Lenient. He had the lenient.
I'm saying he saw it from the daughter's point of view. And I don't.
No, I'm joking, but yeah, no. I'm glad that he did. And I'm glad somebody.
I wouldn't want to taint Rav with the term a Democrat. Rav deserves more respect than ever calling him a Democrat.
100%. But it's nice to see someone with a more sort of liberal sort of approach, like us, which is great.
Okay, so that's what it seems as though the Bryce is arguing. So from here we see that the father receives payments for his daughter's injury. So the Gemara answers no. Here we're also dealing with the loss of employment. However, the father is not entitled to any injury payments due to his daughter. So that's very, very interesting. So what it's saying is even this Bryce is a little bit more enlightened. If the father wounds his daughter, he doesn't have to pay money out to her, but only to his son. And we'll see why later on. It will be explained. But if anybody injures his daughter, he is not entitled to nezek, her actual damage, her permanent disability claim, capital disability. He's not entitled to her medical bills, her pain, her humiliation. He's only entitled to a loss of employment because that is tangibly costing him money. And that's reasonable. So even that Bryce agrees with Rav, and even Rav Elazar agrees with, and Rav agree on that issue. So it's not an issue. So having cited the Bryce, the Kamara makes a comment. And what does it say? Okay, so the next thing it says is, if one wounds his adult son, he shall give him compensation immediately. It's like asking him a question. But they contrasted this brisa with the next brisa, because now we're seeing, this is the first brisa. There's a second brisa that says, regarding one who wounds the sons of daughters of others. In other words, this is the second brisa. Regarding one who wounds the sons or daughters of others, if they are adults, he shall give them compensation immediately. If they are minors, he shall establish a trust for them. But if one injured his own sons or daughters, he is not liable whether they are minors or adults. And why does this statement contradict the last brisa? Because it implies something a little bit different. Firstly, that there's a trust established for both boys and girls, okay, that are minor, and if they are injured by their own father, then what actually happens is that So the second brasa basically states that the father is never liable for an injury he inflicts upon his own child. It doesn't matter whether it's a man or a woman. There's no preferential treatment that seems to be given to the son. Even an adult child, it's asking. You know what I mean? It seems that the father, so even if it's unfair, at least it's equal sex unfair. So it's better. Do you know what I mean? There's second brisa deals that there's no different rules for a boy or girl. The first brisa says that the son's entitled to payment, but the adult son payment immediately, minor son a trust. Daughter nothing if the father hurts. But if the daughter's hurt by others, the nezek, medical humiliation and pain goes to the daughter, and loss of employment goes to the father. Whereas the second brisa says that the father doesn't owe any money to his children, whether they're boys or girls, if he injures them. Okay? So the Gemara said, well, why is there a contradiction between the two brises? It's not difficult. Here in the second brisa, it speaks of where the children are dependent on their father's table. What do we mean? Is that they're financially dependent upon the father, the children. So the father is not liable even if he injures an adult child. Why? Because it's quite simple. Since the father financially supports his children, he need not compensate them for the loss of employment. Listen very carefully. But he would still have to pay the other four categories. Now this can sit easy with you guys. And this is according to.
Can you just repeat that last? Just repeat that last. I was listening, but didn't hear one sentence properly.
Okay.
Just that last sentence.
So you could say, how can a father injure these children and not have to pay? Gemara is saying no. It's not like that. What we learn from here is whether they're minors or adults. The only time he doesn't have to pay for his children is for their loss of employment if he's financially supporting them. You know, and why we say adults is some adults are financially still dependent upon their parents. So if the person, whether it be a boy or girl, a young lady or a young man, is still financially dependent on the father and he injures them, he still has to pay them for the four other damages: medical, nezek, actual damage, pain, and humiliation, but not for loss of employment because he's financially supporting. And the same rule goes for men and women.
Yeah, that actually makes sense. I want to ask you, is it the same whether he does it deliberately or unintentionally? Is it the same sort of thing, same punishment?
Well, it'll cost him either the same, but in terms of how the court deals with it, it's difficult to know.
Deliberate's a problem. You know, if it's just a smack because the kid's done something wrong, that's fine. But it can border onto
abuse, abuse,
physical abuse. Yeah,
I agree. Listen, I don't know enough about Shas to know how it remedies it. I know in Makot it does deal with a case where a father's trying to instruct his son, or whatever the case may be. I don't know enough about family court law in Talmudic times to know how that would be approached. It's beyond the scope. The only thing I can do is learn the daf, prepare for the daf, and please God, field any questions you throw to me regarding the daf. More than that.
No. Sometimes what we throw to you, especially you get it a lot of the time anyway. And sometimes we're lucky that it's actually within the scope of what you read. So it's within the notes.
Yeah.
So we do get an answer. So that's why we try. That's why I try. I realize that you haven't covered everything, but I was hoping maybe one of the notes had.
And I think one day, please God, I'd like to do Daf Yomi just for the fact of having a broad perspective. In fact, I don't think Daf Yomi would be right for me. I would like to do Amud Yomi, which means instead of a full Daf, instead of it taking 8 years, take 16 years, and
that makes more sense.
That makes more sense to me.
Yeah, me too as well.
Yeah, I mean, Arthur's got the ability to do it. I mean, if you look at the coverage that he does, there's no reason why Arthur couldn't do the whole of Shas. Believe me, he might end up teaching us. I kid you not. Yeah, but
it's taking me 16 years after doing 8 because my family only lives to about 60. Unless.
Okay, so Arthur's on the Daf Yomi program, and I'm on the other.
That's it. There we go.
Okay, but please God, you know what? It talked about one of the Gedolah Yisrael that studied at Or Sarah, I'm trying to think who it was that was sickly from young, and he died at 104 or something, and whatever, and he was touch and go most of his life, and he was the Gadol Israel. So sometimes you get special help. Although I know some people would rather die young than learn Torah. So, but that's not you. Do you remember that? I just want to mention a joke before we go back to the Gemara. Do you remember that joke I told you, Gavin, guys, that the leaders of they were the leaders of the generation, and they were learning Shas or whatever, and they looked around, and there was a blonde, young, pretty girl in her 20s, Tzvi, and was part of the shir, and they wondered what she did to merit learning with the Gadol Yisrael. So they said to the person in charge, listen, what did she do? Did she save it? No, this is her version of Gehinnom.
This is
her version of Gehinnom, of hell.
Okay, I don't know if that'll go down well at all from tables, but at our from table it'll go down very well.
Yeah, you can't tell it at certain tables. Anyway,
Yeah.
let's get back to
No,
the
but you
Gemara.
can just talk at all tables. Okay, I've just written a book about how to fall down the stairs. It's a step-by-step guide.
Very, very cute. All right, guys.
Kevin, did you get that? That's good for Kevin.
Say again. The
You
title.
got that, you see. You
How
must
to
have
fall
found
down the
that. That's
stairs.
heavy.
Step by
Guys,
step.
step
what
by-
is it?
No,
Ladder.
I've just written a book how to fall down the stairs. It's a step-by-step guide.
Okay.
it's cute. It's cute. Okay, so let's okay. So basically, so it says, they said it's not difficult. Here in the second brace, it speaks of where the children are dependent on their father financially, and the father is not liable if he injures even an adult child. However, here in the first brace, it speaks of where children are not financially independent, and that's the reason the father is fully liable for injuring them. And there we said we're only speaking about loss of employment. The father has to pay for injuring them for the other four payments. Okay, so the Gemara challenges the explanation, and it says, in what manner have you established the first brisa? In a case where the children are not dependent on the father financially, if so, if you're saying that that's the case with regards to loss of employment, if so, consider the latter part of the brisa, which states, one who wounds his minor daughter is not liable, and not only that, but others who wound her are obligated to give compensation to her father. So it's asking, but if she's not being supported by her father, the assailant should have to give the payment to her because she needs the sustenance. In other words, the question from the Gemara is, okay, so how can you in the first brisa have a blanket rule saying the father isn't liable if he injures her, because it has to tie up with the second brisa saying he's not liable because she's financially dependent upon him. So then the question is, well, then how do you answer that other people have to give the money to the father? You understand that if she is financially dependent upon him, but in a case where she's not financially dependent upon him, because she in that particular case, she would get to keep the money. But what happens if you have a case where the father's not actually looking after his daughter financially at all? So why should the father get the money? That's what it's asking in the Gemara. So, Gavin, this is quite progressive. Does that make sense? Since the father is not supporting her, let the girl receive the payment for loss of employment, the Gemara states. So even according to the one who said that the master can say to his slave, work for me, but I will not sustain you, the ruling concerning a Canaanite slave, the master can say to him, do your work for me all day, and at night go and recline in your seat. So let me just tell you what this is compared to. It's saying there's a discussion in Gittin, in the 12th daf. I was speaking to you guys yesterday about it. A dispute where the master has the legal right to impose the conditions on the slave. In other words, it's saying to a Canaanite slave, listen, I'm not going to support you financially. You work for me all day for nothing, and at night you go beg for your food, and you can keep what you earn. So that's a whole argument in Gittin. Is that fair? So can you do such a thing? Well, if a Canaanite slave steals from you are you entitled to just take back those earnings for the labor during the day? And how do you expect him to get his own food? No. So the whole argument with there is that obviously that's not the case with the Jewish slave, because with the Jewish slave, it has to, as it says in the pasuk in Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 16, that after working for 6 years, a Hebrew servant goes free. So if he chooses to stay with his master after his term expires, he can do so. But whether or not he is there for the initial period or afterwards, it's got to be a case where it suits the Hebrew servant to stay longer. In other words, it's his decision. It's not like a Canaanite slave that stays with you for life. And it says, what does it mean, be good with you? In food and with drink, a master may say, work for me, but I may not sustain you. You cannot do that to a Hebrew slave. So it's saying, how the heck can you expect this for a father to do this to his daughter? In other words, if you can't force your Hebrew servant to work for you without support, how can you force your daughter to work for you without support? In other words, you want to keep the money for loss of employment, but you're not financially helping your daughter. How can that be possible? That's what it's trying to reconcile in the first brisa. So what is it? What's the answer to this? It says, it is as Rava, the son of Rav Ula, said elsewhere, the Mishnah's ruling is needed only with respect to the daughter's surplus income. In other words, the earnings over and above what she needs to feed herself. So if the father is not supporting her financially, she gets to keep the loss of employment income to cover the expenses. But if it's extra, Gavin, you're falling asleep. If it's extra,
I'm not going to say.
I now saw your head drop. If it's extra, the father receives the surplus, but she needs exactly what she needs for the food. If the father's supporting her, he keeps the loss of employment. So that's fairly clear. Okay. So there's one more thing that the Gemara.
And then she gets everything. Then if she's moved out of home already, or he's not supporting her, she gets all 5.
No. We're not talking in a case of a Bulgarian when she's 12 and a half and has 2 people. Then she's a legal adult. But you're bringing up a good point. We did say an adult that's supported by a parent, the father gets the loss of employment. That's a good point. But if she's not dependent on him financially, she gets even that. If she is, he gets the loss of employment. But if he's not supporting her financially, she does give him the surplus for loss of employment, providing she's covered her own expenses. If it's gravy money, extra, so to speak. So the Gemara is in agreement with that liberal way of thinking completely. The father cannot take advantage of his daughter financially at all. So the Gemara challenges its explanation of the second brisa. In a case where the children are financially dependent on the father is not liable if he injures them. We don't mean not liable, guys, again, for medical pain, actual damage, or humiliation. We're talking about loss of income because he's financially supporting her. So there's always this balance. When the father's responsible, then he doesn't have to pay for losses. If he's irresponsible, the children get to keep it. Okay. But there's a question that arises regarding a third party who wounds such children. The brisa rules, if they are adults, he shall give them full compensation immediately. And if they are minors, he shall establish a trust for them. So the father, if they are adults and not financially dependent on him, the father has to give the money immediately to his children. And if they're minors, he establishes a trust for them. But why should the children receive the compensation? It should be given to the father. So the question now is something else. Is that since the father doesn't compensate the children for loss of employment when he injures them, it follows that when someone else injures them, the father should receive that compensation. It's saying he's supporting them financially. Then why in that case, if he's supporting them financially, do they get to have both sides of the coin and keep for loss of employment? So the Gemara answers, when the father's minds if his child takes the loss of employment payment, when it concerns something that causes him a financial loss. However, when it concerns something that comes from outside, he does not mind. So all it's saying is there, guys, if he has to pay the daughter out of his own pocket for loss of employment, in that particular case, it bugs him because it's costing him money. But if a third party pays money to the daughter, a normal father would be quite happy if his daughter got the money. It ain't costing him anything. That's all it's saying. So it depends. So you can't use the rule if the father doesn't pay, others can't pay. Because he's out of pocket in the one case and the other is not out of pocket. So the Gemara objects and it says, but there is this case of a found object when children come from the outside and yet the father minds if it keeps it. So for example, he's got minor children and they find a diamond in Kimberley. Now the father knows that there's no value for them to keep it, but he's going to get aggravated if they keep it because it could pull the family out of impoverishment. So therefore they say that's a case when the children find something and it hasn't cost the father money, but if they keep it, it would irritate the father. So you can't say that even if it costs the father no loss in terms of deficit from him, not added gains, they're two different definitions, it could bug the father in certain cases. Okay, so the Gemara says, listen, you've got to look at the criteria here. Regarding a profit that comes to such children from the outside, and concerning which they have no physical pain, the father minds if he keeps it. In other words, if they find a diamond and the children were just in the dirt, they would be irritated because the family could be out of impoverishment and they're not going to see the value. But concerning outside money that gets given because somebody injured his daughter, most fathers love their daughters and wouldn't want them to go through any sort of pain at all. So then he's not going to keep it because it's not a case of it's not a case where the children found something at no cost to their health or mental sanity. So obviously the father would make sure even that extra money would go to the daughter because he would not want his daughter to have suffered that sort of injury without any benefit coming directly to her. But regarding compensation for an injury, which they had physical pain and it came to them from the outside, he doesn't mind if they keep it. So then the Gemara says, but there's a case of a minor girl where she had physical pain and the money came from the outside and the father minds. And not only that, when others wound her, they're obligated to give compensation to the father. So what's happening as far as that's case? So the Gemara is saying, look, that's a very, very odd case. Most parents are not begrudging, uses the term begrudging. And at the end of the day, in that particular case, the father was begrudging. He wanted to keep everything and give his daughter nothing, despite pain, despite anything, despite the fact that it didn't cost money. So there are two criteria, okay? And the two criteria are as follows, is that something that causes him financial loss, they don't make him pay, like when he hurts his daughter, that he pays for loss of employment. Everything to do with her recovery, he pays, but not the loss of employment because he's financially taking care of her, okay? But if somebody else injures her and then has loss of employment, he would give that money to his daughter because it doesn't cost him financially. It comes from the outside. And the second factor is the fact that there's no physical pain. In other words, anything that would cause his children pain, most parents would make sure that children get the money. But if they find like a diamond where they've gone through nothing but dig through dirt, the father would be resentful, especially if it could pull the family out of impoverishment. So there's two factors. No physical pain, which means in that case, an outside party that gives a diamond to the father, whatever, to the daughter, the father's entitled to keep it because the daughter hasn't gone through any trauma to get it. And anything that causes the father money in terms of financial loss, they don't make the father pay for loss of employment for one simple reason, is that he's been supporting them. Now, I've got 2 minutes to share a chart with you. So just give me 1 second. This would make it absolutely clear. We'll end on this note. All right. That's it, guys. Look, so father's liability for loss of employment if he provides no support, which is the first pricer. If he damages his adult son or daughter, he has to pay immediately. If it's a minor son, he establishes a trust until he's financially mature enough, a minor daughter, he only has to pay her the sustenance, in other words, continually pay for looking after her, but not for the surplus, because she's not going to work like the son would. The son is seen in higher employment regard. As far as one, that's for somebody that pays no support. So he pays no support. He gives his daughter enough. Now that he has to pay support for her, like maintenance, because now she's got no other way to do it. As far as support's concerned, if he's supporting the children financially, there's no liability for loss of employment. Regarding third-party liability, if there's no support that the father's given, the third party pays the adult son or daughter. If it's a minor son, establishes a trust. And if it's a minor daughter, gives her for sustenance and the father keeps a surplus. If the father's supporting the children, it doesn't matter. The loss of employment still goes to the adult son or daughter. Minor son establish a trust, minor daughter establishing a trust. That's according to the second brisa. So there's a difference between the first brisa and the second. Guys, isn't this chart lovely?
Yeah, it's outstanding. It doesn't look like your work, because I know your work.
It's not my work. I write like chicken scratch, like a doctor without the brains.
That's right, and this is legible, so that's why I can see.
Exactly.
So it's not